COVID hospitalizations are overcounted. Thousands trapped in a Virginia snowstorm. And a case against Jeffrey Epstein's guards is dismissed. That and more on this week's headlines. Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. On Monday, the U.S. reported over 1 million new COVID cases. Hey, we broke the record. That means we get to put in our initials. But that never gets old. The World Health Organization announced a record weekly increase in global COVID cases, 9.5 million recorded infections, a 71% increase from the previous week. However, there were fewer deaths recorded this week. COVID deaths usually occur about 2 weeks after infection, so there will probably be an increase in that number about 14 days from now. But the WHO says Omicron still seems to be far less deadly than the Delta COVID variant. Dr. Anthony Fauci said the peak of this Omicron-fueled COVID surge may still be a few weeks away, which means we'll get to put in our initials a few more times before this is over. I guess we should keep getting COVID vaccine boosters every 6 months, right? Well, not according to one of the scientists that helped develop the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID vaccine. Professor Andrew Pollard said, "It's just not, from a global perspective, affordable, sustainable, or deliverable to give fourth doses to everyone on the planet every 6 months. And remember that today, less than 10% of people in low-income countries have even had their first dose. So the whole idea of regular fourth doses globally is just not sensible." The CDC seemingly agreed. It basically said, you're right. We can't give people COVID boosters every 6 months. We have to give them COVID boosters every 5 months. The CDC supported the FDA's decision to offer Pfizer COVID vaccine boosters after 5 months instead of 6. The CDC still recommends waiting 6 months to receive a Moderna booster, waiting 2 months to receive the Johnson & Johnson booster, and not waiting to invest everything you own in Pfizer stocks. Buy! Follow the science. And the money. Luckily, hospitalization rates are remaining relatively low compared to previous COVID surges, although those numbers are steadily rising. However, there have been lots of news articles recently about how COVID hospitalizations among children are soaring at record numbers, which all sounds pretty scary. However, Dr. Anthony Fauci said that hospitalization rates of children are being overcounted. This is because children are automatically tested for COVID after being admitted. So while many children in the hospital may have COVID, they aren't all in the hospital because of COVID. Wait, wasn't the idea that COVID hospitalizations are being overcounted basically considered a conspiracy theory a few months ago? So Fauci backtracked on denying the coronavirus could have come from a Chinese lab, and now he's backtracking on hospitals overcounting COVID. If he keeps coming out in support of things once considered conspiracy theories, in 6 months, I'm expecting Fauci to announce that JFK was assassinated by the CIA, and that the CIA is run by lizard people living at the center of the moon, which is hollow, obviously. I knew it. New York Governor Kathy Hochul shares this sentiment about COVID hospitalizations being overcounted, and announced that New York hospitals will differentiate between people hospitalized with COVID and people hospitalized because of COVID, leading millions across the U.S. to scream, "They're just now doing this? Why weren't they doing that from the beginning?" Hochul said, someone is in a car accident, they go to the emergency room, they test positive for COVID while they're there. They're not there being treated for COVID. This is exactly the same talking point people were making a year and a half ago, and they were called anti-science conspiracy theorists. In 6 months, I'm expecting Hochul to announce that the plandemic was started by Bill Gates as part of a plot to help fellow billionaires by getting people addicted to social media and buying things online. Something else being changed in New York is the fact that disgraced Governor Andrew Cuomo is no longer being charged for allegedly groping one of his aides. The district attorney assigned to prosecute this case dropped the charges, saying he didn't think he could prove the crime was committed. To that I say, hey, Mr. District Attorney, since you suddenly find yourself with so much free time, if you want to charge Andrew Cuomo with something, how about the fact that his policies killed thousands of grandparents in nursing homes? Why is he still not facing consequences for that? It won't be hard to prove. His initials are at number 1 on the killing grandmas rankings. More after the break. Welcome back. Parts of the Florida Panhandle received snow this week. This is quite unusual. The only white powder you typically see in Florida this time of year is all the cocaine in Miami Beach. Florida isn't the only southern state to be affected by freezing temperatures. Thousands of drivers in Virginia were trapped in their vehicles for hours after a snowstorm forced 47 miles of Interstate 95 to close. Emergency services weren't able to assist motorists, some of whom were trapped for over 24 hours. This could possibly result in lawsuits, because after all, it's cruel and unusual to be forcibly detained in Virginia. This is the one time that the old man is right to yell at the clouds, since that's where the snow came from. Virginia Governor Ralph Northam, who leaves office next week, defended the slow response to the situation and blamed drivers for getting themselves stuck, saying, "We gave people warnings, and people need to pay attention to these warnings, and the less people that are on the highways when these storms hit, the better." Yes, because as we all know, when the government gives people warnings and tells them not to go out and do something, everyone listens. That's why America has 0 COVID cases. How do politicians not know this at this point? If Ralph Northam really wanted the highway to be clear and empty, he should have announced he was having a rally for himself on it. President Biden is trying to encourage competition in the meat industry in order to fight inflation and lower rising food costs. Biden said capitalism without competition isn't capitalism, it's exploitation. I agree with the sentiment that competition is the driving force of capitalism, but given that Biden is encouraging cheaper meat alternatives, is it just me, or does this sound like how we're going to end up with Soylent Green? Well, I guess that would also help solve the overpopulation problem. And hey, if it brings back the McDonald's dollar menu, I'm for it, especially if it gives us the McRib year-round. Biden also increased the purchase size of Pfizer's antiviral COVID pill, Paxlovid, from 10 million to 20 million doses. What did I tell you? Buy! The FDA gave an emergency use authorization to Paxlovid on December 22nd. However, according to the FDA, Paxlovid can cause severe and possibly even life-threatening side effects when combined with other common drugs, such as antidepressants or medicines used to lower cholesterol. Sell! Way to double the order on a drug that people are now going to be too afraid to take. Maybe we can sell them to other countries, along with all the unsold Kansas City Chiefs 2021 Super Bowl champion shirts. And after the break, vaccine incentives aren't working. Welcome back. Yesterday was January 6th, the one-year anniversary of the Capitol riot, which was either the worst thing to happen to America since the Civil War of 1812, 9/11, Pearl Harbor, or an FBI, Antifa, BLM false flag operation to smear conservatives as the worst thing to happen to America since the Civil War of 1812, 9/11, Pearl Harbor. And outside Dr. Fauci is on. I did an entire episode about the dueling narratives of January 6th earlier this week. But yesterday, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi hosted a solemn observance of the anniversary, which she kicked off with a performance by the cast of Hamilton. At first, I thought they meant they had written and performed a new song about the January 6th riots, from the creators of Hamilton, Insurrection, the musical. But it was actually a Zoom performance of a song from Hamilton. Not only that, it was a recycled Zoom performance. That is, as the kids say, cringe. Unless the kids have stopped saying cringe, and saying cringe is now cringe. Speaking of things that seemed like a good idea but weren't, According to a study, incentives offered by some states to try and encourage citizens to receive COVID shots didn't work in significantly increasing vaccine uptake. Some of these incentives included lottery-style drawings in some states, with prizes of up to $1 million. But I don't think it's much of a surprise that this didn't work. One of the main reasons some people refuse to get the COVID vaccine is because they don't trust the government. So you're not going to convince them by offering money from the government. That's like if Jeffrey Dahmer offered you $1 million to hang out with him next to a sausage grinder. You're not going to trust that check to clear. The only green anyone would see from this offer is Soylent Green. And just to be clear, YouTube, I'm not saying that vaccines are dangerous. I'm not even saying that the US government is as bad as Jeffrey Dahmer. I'm just saying some people think they're worse. After all, the government chews people up and spits them out. Well, at least Jeffrey Dahmer didn't waste food. One vaccination incentive that's often been employed is continued employment. Starbucks announced it will require its workers in the US to either receive a COVID vaccine or undergo weekly testing starting February 9th. Personally, when I'm at Starbucks, I'm not worried about the barista's vaccination status. I'm more concerned about the fact that they can't spell my name. Considering how many of them are clearly illiterate, they probably won't be able to find the CVS to get vaccinated at, because they see the CVS sign and think, that must be a Best Buy. And of course, the biggest health risk at Starbucks isn't COVID. It's losing a foot to diabetes from drinking too many Frappuccinos. Speaking of dangerously incompetent employees, the jail guards assigned to watch over Jeffrey Epstein when he killed himself. Charges were dropped for the prison guards, Michael Thomas and Tova Noel, who fabricated records the night of Jeffrey Epstein's suicide. The Manhattan District Judge dismissed the case after prosecutors said Thomas and Noel offered truthful insight into the toxic culture, subpar training, staffing shortages, and dysfunctional management of the now-closed Metropolitan Correctional Center. And Noel's attorney added the shortcomings and mistakes made by Ms. Noel were a result of inexperience, lack of proper and sufficient training, and being put in a position to fail by the leadership of MCC and the Bureau of Prisons. So the argument here is that no, there was no grand conspiracy. Thomas and Noel were simply incompetent due to poor training from a mismanaged prison, and they lied to save their own hides after failing to prevent a high-profile inmate from killing himself. That's reasonable. In fact, it's so reasonable that I wouldn't be surprised to see these two receive guard jobs at a different prison, specifically the prison holding Ghislaine Maxwell. We might just be only 6 months away from noted conspiracy theorists Kathy Hochul and Anthony Fauci announcing that Ghislaine Maxwell didn't kill herself. So what do you think about the stories we covered this week? Let us know in the comments below. And remember, America Uncovered is supported mainly by viewers. Be sure to visit patreon.com/AmericaUncovered. Contribute $1 or more per episode. We rely on your support to help us keep making great episodes. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.